Howdy, and welcome to episode 127 of In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. In today's episode, we welcome Gary from Guns Over Texas. A man so big, he makes a Desert Eagle 50 look like a baby Glock. And today, he joins the roving horde to discuss open carry in Texas, campus carry, the future of Second Amendment issues, and some future predictions. I'm your host, Aaron. Jason is out on vacation, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. We've got a great show lined up for you guys today. Before we do that, let's dive into the announcements. There are 4 episodes left. Count them, 4 episodes left in this season of In the Rabbit Hole. We will be signing off April 27th. We will be signing back on again August 3rd. Again, the rabbit hole is not going away. We are just taking our summer break. Next announcement. For those of you who have young, sensitive ears listening, or for those of you who have tender ears yourself, this may not be the episode for you. You see, when Gary and I get together, the humor can be a little, shall we say, locker room humor. So, if that kind of stuff offends your sensibilities, this may not be the episode for you. Consider yourself warned. Last announcement. I get some emails from time to time asking where Jonathan went. They ask, did you two get in a fight? Did Jonathan get eaten by the zombies? What happened to the poor guy? Well, the short version of the story is Jonathan's life got busy. He got a new job, he moved to a new city, he got his wife knocked up, they had a little baby boy, so time has been extremely tight for Jonathan and he's been unable to make it onto the show, but he does want everyone to know that he does miss doing the show, he misses the roving horde, and hopefully sometime in the future he will rejoin the show and the three of us can be back together again. And with that, that wraps up the announcements for the day. Let's talk to Gary about guns and stuff. Hey, Gary, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you very much, sir.
And you are one of the co-hosts of Guns Over Texas, which is one of my favorite podcasts.
I do appreciate that. We're big fans of yours as well.
Oh, well, thank you. And you're also the last person to sign off on my CHL that I was that I could at least pass the shooting portion of the test, no matter how hungover we were. Yeah, I know. That's the crazy part.
I know. It almost, I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, it's a right, and I almost, there's a part of me that says we shouldn't have to do the test and we shouldn't have to do any of it. But then I see the idiots that come to these ranges, and I go, I don't know. Maybe we should have a license.
I feel the exact same way. It's very tricky for me because in one hand I'm just like, God, I do believe in constitutional carry and everything else, but then I do see, you go to the range and you see some people handle their guns, and sometimes you do understand why range operators can be a little touchy.
Yeah, well, they used to say, well, they still say it in the range business, that for every stupid rule there was a stupid shooter.
Yeah.
And I unfortunately worked at Top Gun at one point in time, and a couple other ranges around town, and I have unfortunately seen just about every stupid thing you can think of. People waving, What is amazing to me is when you really think about the number of people that go to ranges on a daily basis, particularly public ranges, and do not just stupid but truly dangerous things, and yet somehow the vast majority of them never manage to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just one of those weird law of averages thing. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah.
And, I still remember a range changing hands some years ago, and a friend of mine was talking to the range owner, and she was lamenting the ownership of the range. And he said, you haven't seen excitement until someone kills himself on your range. And then 6 weeks to the day later, some guy commits suicide in her parking lot.
Oh.
And I felt bad for her, but I was like, yeah, unfortunately, you're probably going to have at least 1 or 2 more before you sell this range. And sure enough, she did.
Wow.
So it's just the nature of the business, unfortunately. I mean, we're dealing with dangerous tools, and people hurt themselves all the time, and sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
So.
And we were starting to talk a little bit about the unicorn has finally started to appear, the Glock 43.
Yes.
And so now you actually had a little bit of a gossip about that. It was a lot of people were being told, yes, it does exist. It's not a myth. We're not screwing with you.
Yeah. In fact, it was a little bit more than a year ago that Glock said that the unicorn did exist and that it was in testing. They told us that the redheaded stepchild none of us wanted, the Glock 42, would come out first. And their reasoning for that supposedly was that they knew that no one would buy the Glock 43, or rather they wouldn't buy the 42 if the 43 came out first. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, yeah, maybe so. I mean, why would I buy a 380 if I can buy a 9?
Which doesn't make a lot of sense, because at that point, if you know no one's going to buy it, don't make it.
One would think, but apparently there was also an issue of whether or not there would be enough sales volume, because Glock makes its money primarily from military and police contracts, and there weren't a lot of big police agencies looking for that gun. But the funny thing is, we know that the concealed carry market has been growing because we have a whole new demographic that has opened up into that. We've got a lot more women that are coming into it. And that was supposedly another factor in the 42 coming out first, was that being a locked breech 380, that a lot of women would be able to shoot that gun. And it does shoot well for a 380. Although my hands are so big that they wrap up over the top of the gun, so it won't cycle in my hands. Mm-hmm. But among 380s, it's probably the one that I would recommend most among them, most that are out there. But like I said, we now have the 43. I have yet to see the official announcement on Glock's website, but every other, Truth About Guns, guns.com, Firearms Blog, all these guys are putting out posts about it, and we've seen it in the upcoming edition of Recoil magazine. So it's out there. We have the measurements. It's just a hair larger than the Glock 42, and similar in size to the Glock 26.
I'm really excited, but of course now it's almost going to become a bit of a moot point for some people, since the big topic we're talking about today is open carry here in Texas.
Right.
So
exactly.
Now what's going on with that? And it seems like there was a lot of stuff proposed. What is actually getting ready to get passed here?
Well, it looks like SB 17 is the bill that's going to make it onto the House floor, because it has just passed through the Senate. And SB 17, when I first read it, I was worried that it wouldn't be passed at all or even considered, because literally what it seemed to do was just do a copy and paste. They literally went through the current CHO laws, chapter 9 and chapter 42 of the Texas Penal Code, and just replace the word concealed with handgun. So what it's really meant to do is provide licensed open carry. It's modifying the existing CHL laws to allow a person who holds a CHL to have the option of carrying openly if they so choose. Now, there were, I think, 30 plus amendments that the Democrats tried to shove onto the bill that were all shaken off. And we were left with it does not provide for open carry on campuses. So the bill does not address campus carry, which also made it through the Senate today. But what it does do is, one of the amendments does require that the CHL instructor, or now handgun instructor, provide training on the use of retention holsters and how to retain the gun. Mm-hmm. So, and I actually don't think that's a bad idea. We come back to, I don't think you should have to have it, but then you see all these folks that want to carry a gun and have no clue what that means. Mm-hmm. I guess one of the things that bugs me is there's often this argument that, well, no one has any statistics and there's no proof that anyone grabs guns that are carried openly. And I'm guessing that these people ignore police officers. Mm-hmm. When I was growing up, my dad did not carry openly. He was an investigator with HPD, so he didn't carry openly. But I grew up hearing of officers at that time who carried in what they call the clamshell holster.
Yeah.
And these were the holsters that the guns literally just fell out of the front of them. They were very fast holsters, but they were not secure. And at one point in time, just looking around the country, you probably had on a daily basis at least one report of an officer being, if not killed, at least assaulted with his own firearm, because literally a crook walked up and snatched his gun. And what came out of that was first level, level 1, then level 2, and ultimately level 3 and 4 holsters we have today for retention. And so many of the open carry advocates seem to ignore that. So you see these guys walking around with their Phobos holsters, open top holsters, and they're presenting their gun for somebody to grab it. And they don't think that that's possible or realistic. And there seems to be an assumption that with open carry that there's an automatic deterrent. And I personally just don't think that's the case. I don't think that there will be a lot of gun grabs, but there will probably be at least as many as there are for police officers already. There's a bit of concern there that is something that seems to be ignored by a lot of the open carry advocates.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I was spent some time in New Mexico and Arizona, it wasn't a huge concern of mine, but it was still a concern. I mean, just like anything else. I mean, people do dumb, weird shit. And you just never know. There are crazy people out there. Unfortunately,
there are. And Arizona had that today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I still will be interested in hearing the details of that. But yeah, there's always idiots out there, and there's nothing we can do to eliminate the idiot. But there are calculated risks. And my concern with a lot of your open carry advocates is that so many of them are ignoring those risks.
Mm-hmm.
But, like I said, we come back to it's a right. I think you have the right to be stupid. And if you want to do it, go for it.
So now that leads us into what are your feelings in general about open carry?
My personal feelings are that, one, I don't think it will lead to blood in the streets. Open carry of rifles and shotguns has been legal for over 150 years here in Texas, and it has never been a major issue. So I think that for the people who really do carry openly and just go about their business, I don't think it'll be much of an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's the guys that are doing the, look at me, the bravado, showing off, intentionally walking into areas where they are at a higher risk that are going to be getting themselves into trouble.
Like an AR pistol in a Phobos holster or something.
Yeah, and then walking, I don't know, through the middle of, Sunnyside or Crosby or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That guy is asking for trouble.
Yeah.
But other than that, you're walking through the Galleria. Galleria may not be all that smart these days, but, if you're doing it in the Galleria, to me, you're more likely to be just trying to show off to say, hey, look at me, I'm Billy Badass.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But, I think that the predictions of blood in the street are probably seriously exaggerated, just like they were when we had the CHO law before that.
Oh, yeah.
In 95. I can remember hearing, hey, there's going to be blood in the streets and people will be shooting each other just because of, a disagreement over a parking spot. And we know that never happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think with open carry, we see all the same predictions. And I think that what will come to fruition is it'll pass. There will be a few people who do it, and the novelty will wear off, and they'll go back to carrying concealed.
Mm-hmm. Most people I know that are actually in areas where open carry, they still carry concealed.
Right.
And their whole thing is, occasionally I do it when it's just not comfortable or reasonable to do. But for the most part, they carry concealed.
I would be okay. In fact, I like the idea of legalizing open carry. For instance, if I walk into Brendan's restaurant and I take off my jacket, that should not be an offense. That's the reason to me for legalizing open carry, not to show the gun off, but just to make the process of living with a gun. And a lot of people don't understand that, but to wear a gun on a daily basis is a lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And to make that lifestyle more convenient, sure, I have no problem with open carry in that respect. If you're sitting in your car, having the gun holstered shouldn't be an issue. It shouldn't be, well, the cop walked up and saw it in plain view, therefore it's an offense. That to me is the reason for open carry. And that was really the reason for open carry with rifles and shotguns, was that, you're out hunting. It makes sense and stands to reason that you might have to cross a roadway to get from one piece of property to another while carrying a long gun. And why should you have to go throw a cover over that? So I get it. I don't have a problem with open carry from that perspective. My biggest problem has been, I guess, if anything, that so many of the proponents, in addition to the bravado issues, we've got guys like, CJ Grisham, part of his, and he said this on our show, part of his big reason for wanting open carry is not because he believes in open carry so much, but it's because he can't qualify for a CHL. he can't pass a background check.
Ah, okay.
That does not do him any favors in the argument of why we should have CHL.
Yeah.
Or why we should have open carry.
Yeah.
And I'm blanking on his name right now, but the same is true of the head of open carry Tarrant County. You know, and unfortunately, he's probably a plague on the open carry community.
Yeah.
Much more than CJ Grisham. And that's a scary thought that I'm saying that CJ Grisham is relatively sane compared to this guy. But that is simply the case.
Yeah.
Is if I remember correctly, he's got, I'll have to look up his name here real quick, but I believe he's got at least one conviction for DUI. And I'm sorry, if you have an issue with alcohol and can't control that, then maybe you shouldn't be walking around with a gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's me expressing common sense, and we know that common sense is dangerous in the gun community.
We can't have none of that, man.
Yeah.
None of that. None of that. That somebody might get hurt with common sense involved.
Yeah, you know, or worse, we may get a president with common sense, and well,
no,
God knows that's no good.
No, that's so old fashioned of you. What's that all about?
I don't know, but yeah, it's like you said. As much as we want to express outright freedom, unfortunately, if you watch long enough, you see some idiot that abuses it and makes you understand why people want rules.
Yeah. Well, as they say, this is why we can't have nice things.
Yes.
I mean,
Indeed.
I'm for it and personally excited about it. But I think even my brother was asking me recently, he said, well, are you going to just start carrying openly? And I said, only sometimes. Yeah. And it's really just going to be kind of like what you were saying, a matter of convenience. Like I'm somewhere, I don't want to have to put a jacket on, but at the same time, I don't want to have to be limited in my wardrobe, we'll say. You know, I don't want to have to wear whatever to cover up in 114-degree Houston heat.
There is that, and I think that just the Texas climate is a big reason for open carry. That to me, if you're going to have a logical, reasonable discussion about it, it's 115 degrees in Dallas, in June.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, carrying under a sport coat might be a bit much, but I come back to thinking about my dad and all the years he was on with HPD. My dad walked around in a 3-piece suit all the way through the 1970s. And when he often jokes today, man, he's been retired for 20 years now, but he jokes that when he would walk through a lot of these neighborhoods, people didn't know if he was an insurance salesman, a preacher, or a cop. And because he was just in a suit and you didn't know. But yeah. I mean, as much as we complain about the heat and everything, the guy carried a full-size 357 Magnum in a shoulder rig in a suit every day. So, I look back at that growing up with that example, and I go, if Dad can do it, I can do it too.
Yeah. My grandfather was a federal judge in Louisiana before air conditioning, so and he would wear a suit every day to court. I just I can't even imagine. But at least he kept his 357 and a Bible on his desk, or his bench, I guess I should say. So he didn't actually have to wag it around.
Yeah.
So now you mentioned earlier about holsters, and I know this is confusing for a lot of people, the difference in retention levels. So what are those differences? So
retention levels, it boils down to whether or not there is an active device that you must defeat to get the gun out of the holster. A level 1 holster really has no real retention other than the tension of the gun to retain it, to keep it from falling out of the holster, quite literally. So in your first level, when they teach police about retaining their guns, they often tell them, hey, your first level of retention, if you're a plainclothes officer, is simply to conceal it. If you have an open top holster, you really don't have any level of retention whatsoever other than to conceal the holster and make it not readily visible to other people. So then the earliest level 2 holsters that came along were the ones that had a thumb brake, which if you think back to, if they didn't have a thumb brake, then they had a flap over the holster. So that was at least one direct, something that took one direct action before you could access the firearm. That's a level 2 holster. The level 3 holsters required at least 2 separate actions. So now you may have a thumb brake in addition to having to rock the gun back and off of a locking device. And now the latest models have 3 separate actions that you have to defeat. So there may be a hood you have to flip off, push the gun down, rock it out, and then do another action to get the gun out of the holster. It does take practice to use that. And A lot of agencies, some very large agencies, not necessarily Houston PD, but a lot of large agencies, when the level 3 holsters came out, it was such a challenge to train those officers to use those holsters that they adjusted their standards and allowed the officers to start their qualification without even having to work out of the holster as a result. So, but to a lot of your younger officers today, they've grown up using nothing but a retention holster, a level 3 or higher level retention holster. And so they can get, their first shot off in 1.5 seconds, under stress because they've trained for it. Whereas a lot of your older officers had not. That's less and less of an issue today. But like I said, you've got those basic levels. Level 1 having no retention whatsoever. Level 2 being at least 1 device. Level 3 being 2 devices. Level 4 being 3 or more devices.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
that makes sense. Now, the Kydex, where the gun snaps into it, but there's nothing mechanical in the way, where do those fit in?
That really is still an open top level 1 type device. Mm-hmm. Comtac actually came out with a version of their International that is a thumb brake, and so that's actually a level 2 type retention holster.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I've seen some of them have started, the Bravos and the Ravens have started trying to play with a level 2 and trying to figure out how to make it work.
They're having to do that because they're seeking law enforcement contracts.
Oh, I wondered what that was all about.
Yeah, that really is driven by you can't sell a holster to a law enforcement agency. An agency now, individual officers are another story, but there's not an agency in the country that won't require their officers to carry at least a level 2 retention holster.
Okay. Now, what do you see as the other upsides of actually open carry?
Like I said, one could argue that there might be a deterrent factor. My problem with that is that it is not borne out by what we just see in day-to-day life with police officers on the street who have obviously open carry. We see people commit crimes in front of officers who are obviously open carrying. They have the benefit of officer presence and being able to call radios out and all that sort of thing, and it doesn't deter people from committing a crime. So to me, there's no advantage there. But one could argue that there is an advantage in terms of your speed of dealing with a threat. But whenever I think of one, I guess, advantage, I can always think of a counterpoint.
Yeah.
And to me, the counterpoint is that how do you get to see this threat before it starts? Mm-hmm. When they're teaching law enforcement about weapon retention, one of the early hard lessons that in the better academies they have these officers go through is they're sitting around at lunch and their instructors will come up and grab their guns from them while they're sitting there at lunch. And the idea being to teach them and reinforce the idea that they can't be quote unquote switched on and in condition 3 or orange or whatever you want to call it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At some point in time, you will have a lapse in judgment or a lapse in your sense of security. And it's at that moment that probably any real threat that's going to come up comes up. So the only real practical advantage to open carry to me is really an issue of comfort and convenience. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, it just, to me, all the other arguments fall apart.
Well, that makes sense. So as an instructor, how are you considering what you're going to start teaching?
I tell everyone we're adults. Mm-hmm. And so my view going into it, I'm not going to tell the student that they need to follow my viewpoint on it. I will tell them my thoughts, which is open carry is a convenience factor. It's certainly a comfort factor. And those are great things. And that's all fine. Going to take advantage of that, understand what the disadvantages are. Disadvantages being that your gun is presented to the public so people know it's there. That may lead to a lot of unnecessary man with a gun call. And unfortunately, that happens even with law enforcement today. And it doesn't necessarily get a lot of attention, but that's part of the reason a lot of agencies, their written policy for their officers that are open carrying is you must have your badge near the gun so that in theory the public goes, oh, that's automatically a cop. Mm. But how hard is it for any of us to buy I don't know, concealed carry holder's badge, not that I've ever seen those before, and put that right next to your gun?
Yeah.
And at a distance, who could see that well enough to go, oh, that's HPD or Harris County or Dallas County or whatever. There's no way for you to see that and know that that's anything other than just a piece of tin. So there's that.
Yeah, most people probably couldn't even tell the difference even right up next to it, which one's which.
Right. And you think about it, in a place like any major city, you've got, typically major cities have at least one major federal office. So you'll have FBI, ATF, Secret Service, Marshal Service, Diplomatic Security Service, all in. So that's minimum 5 federal agencies and 5 different badges before we get into the city, the county, and all the constables. Mm-hmm. So you end up with 8 or 9 badges, and you go to a place like Houston where you have all the smaller suburbs that are nearby: Stafford, Sugar Land, Pasadena, Bel Air. It gets real confusing real quick. So how in the world do you know that any one of those badges?
Yeah.
So there's no real recognition there. But again, as far as what I would tell people, I would say that I'm going to be realistic about it. Here are the advantages. Here are the disadvantages. Understand that you are adding risk. Whatever that risk may be minuscule, but it is an added risk in deciding to carry openly. If you're going to carry openly, now as SB 17, actually one of the amendments does require that we teach retention. So to teach retention, here are your various levels of retention in a holster. Here's the advantages and disadvantages of each. If I were going to recommend a holster, I'll tell you Bianchi or Safariland are pretty much the way to go. Mm. Those have been the standard for a very long time, and they still remain the standard because there's not a lot of other companies that, in fact, Safariland, or I think it's Armor Holdings now, bought up most of the competitors.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah. I mean, so Bianchi and Safariland used to be separate companies. They're the same company now.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so they're the same company. And it used to be that you had Safariland made a lot of your duty rigs, and Bianchi made duty rigs, but they also made a lot of concealed carry or plain clothes carry holsters that had retention built into them. And so that's kind of the way their roles are within Armor Holdings now. Bianchi makes a lot of the plain clothes officer type holsters. In fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, they make the holster used by the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, your armed pilots. Mm-hmm. But that is also a unique holster. This is one of the dangerous things about the open carry legislation versus constitutional carry, is that in writing this legislation, there was an attempt to write in a requirement for a retention holster, which then how do we define what is a retention holster? Mm-hmm. And how do we define what level of retention must it have? So if you look at the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, one of the goofball things about their standard is that holster has to allow for a padlock to pass through the trigger guard.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So I don't know how that holster is supposed to be of any use, but the process of locking this holster up has actually led to at least one documented negligent discharge on board an aircraft.
Yeah, I could kind of see where that was going.
So, in allowing the government to write a standard about what type of retention must be used, you could end up with a stupid standard like that. Thankfully, as far as what got out of the Senate here in the last couple of days, that amendment did get squashed. But it came very close to being, there was a lot of people who went, well, yeah, it's perfectly reasonable. We should, write a standard for how you're going to carry this gun openly. Mm. But like I said, in doing that, you open the door for stupid stuff like the Federal Flight Deck Officer Program. And we definitely don't want that.
No. I don't want to walk around with a padlock in my holster.
But there are people who will call them Democrats who would require that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what happens when you have people making laws about things that they have no experience with. Like, shoot the gun out of their hand. That seems reasonable.
It totally seems reasonable, and I saw it happen once on TV, so surely you can do that.
Yes, of course.
And we all know that the officer who did do that goes, yeah, that was the dumbest thing I ever did on duty.
I remember seeing that video. Yeah, it was an interesting shot, and then he was just kind of like, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. And the whole reason being is that, it's a really small target. But it set an unrealistic expectation. Mm-hmm. And you talk to prosecutors and even, criminal defense attorneys, they'll tell you that that's one of the issues we have now is that people have grown up watching, what's the show, Law and Order. Mm-hmm. And they believe that the court case should work out the way that Law and Order says it does on TV. And so there's always going to be DNA evidence. And when it comes to police shootings, well, if there's not a dash cam and not a body cam, then the cop must have done something wrong. So because otherwise we'd have that on video. Mm-hmm. Letting people who don't know anything about a given subject matter write laws about it is always dangerous.
Yeah. So now what about I know it looked like something was campus carry actually got some movement
Campus
today.
carry did get out of the Senate today. It was approved today. I'll have to look. I'm blanking on the actual bill because there were multiple bills for open carry and campus carry that were before the legislature this year. A minimum of 5 for open carry for sure, and I think at least 3 for campus carry. And they all address it in different ways. But my understanding of the campus carry bill, and it's funny that one is so controversial because the one that passed and the one that everyone's been the only thing that anyone's ever advocated is allowing those who are already licensed to carry on a college campus, not to walk into your elementary school or any of that jazz.
Right.
But for those of us, and I used to work and go to school at UH downtown, and I worked there for 5 years and went to school there for 6. Part-time. And the thing is, if there has ever been a place in my life that I was there on a daily basis that I felt I needed a gun, it was on the campus of UH downtown.
Oh, yeah.
You're walking from 1 Main, which for those who don't know is literally across the street from the Baker Street Jail for Harris County. And then you've got to walk. The area has gone through I guess transformation of years since, but you got to walk up North Main to the North Main parking lot, and there were vagrants and all sorts of interesting folks who'd been let out of the Greyhound bus station down the other end of downtown.
Yeah.
I walked that route on a daily basis for, like I said, 6 years, and yeah, there weren't a lot of other places I've ever been in my life that I felt I needed a gun. And the idea that I couldn't carry one on campus was just absolutely nuts to me. And I was there one day when I'll never forget, there was an incident that happened on campus where because criminals never pay attention to laws, but 2 students apparently decided to pull guns on each other on campus because one called the other East Coast, as I remember from the altercation.
Mm-hmm.
And the other student realized that he didn't have a big enough gun. So he ran up the stairs and into another classroom being chased by the first student with a gun. And I thought to myself, wow. And here I am waiting for a cop to show up. And I can't do anything about this.
Yeah.
And the kid comes in my classroom and he's like, help me hide. And I'm like, why? Why are you in our classroom?
You're like, don't stand next to me, dummy.
Right. So, like I said, it's campus carry is about those sorts of, not so much that sort of incident, but providing that ability for you to walk to and from your vehicle. Because, let's face it, not every campus is UT or Texas A&M, where it's a relatively closed campus in a nice part of town.
Yeah, I mean, even my girlfriend goes to one of the UT medical schools here in Houston, and that's over off Old Spanish Trail.
Right.
We know,
right.
I mean, most of the listeners probably don't know what that means, but let's just say it's not a nice part of town.
Is a interesting part of town.
Yeah, and she walks to school, and I'm always just like, ugh.
Well, it's that old rule, because OST does intersect with Martin Luther King, and for whatever reason, there are very few. In fact, I think only one city in the entire country where Martin Luther King Boulevard is. That boulevard is never in the good area of town.
Yeah.
And so if she's making that walk and surviving that walk, my hat's off to her.
She looks scary. She's small and Asian, so, scares the crap out of everybody.
Gotcha. Because they just don't know what to expect out of her.
I don't know what to expect out of her, and I've known her for 8 years, so, you never know. Yeah, I'm it's funny. For a long time, I really wanted open carry, but when she and I started dating and everything else, and she was over in that part of town going back and forth, and she finally got her CHL. And what was funny, I'm more excited for campus carry just for her than I am for open carry for myself.
Right.
Because, I mean, it really does bug the crap out of me because it's like, well, she's of legal age. She's passed the requirements. What the hell does it matter that she's in an institution of learning? I mean, it's not like gunmen stop outside the doors of universities.
Absolutely not. And that's the problem with the whole idea of making it illegal to carry on a school campus is that it is a crime of procedure. Mm-hmm. So literally, on one side of the sidewalk, I'm perfectly legal. By stepping over to the other side, now it's not. And that has always been it's no different with that than it is in bars. I don't think that you should be barred from carrying in a bar or any other alcohol serving establishment simply because you have a gun on.
Yeah.
Now, if you're drunk, that's another story, but we already have laws in place for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that should be an issue. But yeah, campus carry, what worries me there is that you have so many people, even who are otherwise pro-gun, who will say, well, I don't want my kid carrying a gun. And to me, I guess there's a false logic there because, once you're 18, you can sign up for the military.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole lot of 18-year-olds carrying M4s, in the name of our country and firing those guns in anger and dying in anger. And they're 18. So somehow those aren't kids, but the ones in college are.
Yeah.
That really doesn't make sense to me.
That are even older than the ones fighting and dying for the country.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I do hope that campus carry passes. I think that open carry is a nice to have, but to me, it's not a necessity. I would rather see campus carry first. What is really interesting is the constitutional carry, which I don't see passing very easily in Texas, at least not right now. Not with so many of the alleged conservatives that we have in office at this time.
I think it's all about baby steps at this point. It's, get it passed, show them, hey, look, one more example, blood didn't run in the streets, even though we already had other states we could have already looked to for examples that...
Yeah, Vermont has had, constitutional carry. In fact, a lot of people call it Vermont carry, but they've had it for, because of the way the state constitution was written, they've never been able to pass any real sort of gun control in Vermont.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Vermont has had open carry, constitutional carry. In fact, I believe the way that the Constitution is written, it says that you may keep and bear arms so long as there is not malice in your heart. I believe is the way it is actually written. So very odd.
So they were drunk when they wrote that.
Yeah. So it's kind of cool, but so they've never had laws for or against concealed carry or for or against open carry. Now, I've only been to Vermont twice, and I will say that I've never seen anyone openly carrying a gun. But, Vermont's not exactly a bastion of criminal activity and murder in the streets. So you're right. We could easily look to Vermont as an example there, and it seems to work just fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's funny you were talking about the bars. I know that was one of the things when I was out in Arizona recently. A friend of mine that's a state trooper, highway patrol out there, we were talking about it, and he said, the only reason we even have CHLs anymore really is just so that you can go into a bar with your gun and for reciprocity, and that's about it. Because that's all it gets you anymore, because we've just done away with everything. And what was interesting with them was, because he and I grew up together as kids at a summer camp, and whenever I would go visit him, and especially when the CHLs were really starting to pop up across the country, for them it was a really weird thing in the opposite way for us, because for them it was, well, if you're a good person, you shouldn't hide your gun. Only criminals hide their guns. And so that was their issue with concealed carry, because they were used to having it open. And I think what was the laws there were kind of fun. It was, if you were 21 and you were legal to carry a gun, you could just have one. If you were 18 to 21, you just needed a note from your parents. And I was like, that is so awesome. How is Texas so backwards?
Oh, sounds like Mayberry almost.
It does.
Here's a note from Johnny is cool. Let him carry a gun.
I bought him that gun. He can carry it.
Yeah. Well, I actually get I've actually had a few CHL students over the years who were older gentlemen and ladies who expressed that same sort of thing. They said, well, I think you should open carry because only criminals hide guns. And I'm going, well, that's kind of the same logic that says that only criminals use suppressors. Mm-hmm. And, we know that that's simply not the case, but it's a regional influence on culture there, because you go to places like Finland or any other in Scandinavia, and to hunt with a rifle that doesn't have a muffler on it, as they would call it there, is just rude.
Yes.
And yet here in the States, coming out of the 1930s and all the stuff that was going on with Prohibition, we decided, no, those are the guns of assassins. And I'm like, but you can count on one hand the number of times anyone ever used that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. But I think that we have Hollywood to thank for that.
Yeah.
If anything.
Yeah. They're not silent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
but those of us who actually use them know that. But
most people don't.
Been around them don't get it.
Yeah. I think I have one that's pretty close, but even that, it's still I guess it's if you know what you're listening to, it sounds like a silenced gun. It doesn't sound like it does in the movies.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah, that's a lot of craziness. But I mean, it's interesting. I think we're seeing such a proliferation recently of silencers with the very clever marketing that the different silencer companies finally went, if we just told people that if they did a trust, they could have a silencer, maybe we'd sell more silencers.
Yes, but then we come back to you can't have nice things.
Yeah,
because unfortunately, you went from having maybe, I don't know, 500 or 600 trusts all over the country to literally, I think there were 20,000 applications to create trusts in just a year.
Wow.
A lot of them came out of like one shop, and it flooded the e-file system for the ATF. And, it initially, I don't think anybody at the ATF cared until you had some guys who quite literally were like, well, I'm a felon and I know I'm a felon, but I got this company over here that I want to transfer this gun to.
Mm-hmm.
And once they kind of made it public and thumbed their nose at the ATF about that sort of thing, saying, hey, look at me, I've done all this stupid stuff and yet I can still get a gun because it's not really mine. It belongs to my trust. Yeah, when you do that sort of thing, you could have just been quiet and moved on and been happy, but no, you had to go, oh, look at me.
Kind of like the cigar embrace shenanigans.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
You didn't have to make the YouTube video. Nobody had to know. You could just shut up and enjoyed it. But no, it's a lot like the kids who end up getting the blowjobs from their ninth grade teacher, and it's like, dude, just shut up and enjoy the life.
I do not. What is wrong with this generation? I don't understand it.
Well, I think that's our YouTube and the hey, look at me mindset.
Yeah.
These no one values their privacy anymore, and everybody's looking for their 5 seconds of fame.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not good enough that the woman, can suck a watermelon through a garden hose. You have to tell everyone about it.
It's a strange world we live in these days. Now, that's interesting. Now, I didn't know about those felons. And it was funny because I was just thinking about that the other day. I was fondling one of my latest editions. And I was like, it's somebody's going to screw this up for everybody else real soon. Because there's so many of them. Yeah,
that was one angle of it. Now, the other issue was, from what I understand, there was a group of collectors who they were trying to loosen the rules. And they thought that they could, this administration, to get rid of the CLEO signature requirement by saying, okay, how about we do the NICS background on all transfers, but with the CLEO signature. Because the ATF had already raised the flag of, hey, it's too easy for somebody to just transfer this to an entity, but the reality is the responsible person is in fact a felon. So they were already aware of that potential loophole and wanted to address that. And so these NFA collectors were like, well, we get that concern, but how about we just have the background check and call it a day? No different than buying any other gun, because that's really what happens anyway. If you're buying it on paper for yourself as opposed to your trust, all they're doing is a standard NICS background check, and then the hard part is the CLEO signature, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer signature. Mm-hmm. Which, unfortunately, if you live in like Harris County, that's Adrian Garcia is not going to give you that signature.
Yeah,
and true to form, the government backhanded these guys and said, okay, now that you're willing to let us get that background check, we're going to keep the CLEO requirement. But now we're going to extend it to trusts and corporations as well. And so, it's one of those things, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, everybody should have just stayed quiet, stay low.
Just shut up and enjoyed it, and we'd have been fine.
Now, that's interesting. So and I'd heard something about that they were considering getting rid of that after the new year. What is the movement on that?
The latest movement is, and this was ATF proposal 41P. It first came out at the end of 2013, and they were supposed to take comments on it, and they really were almost making a movement and a change in policy without that required comment period. So that raised a lot of brouhaha, and it kind of got shelved. And the last I heard was that it was being pushed back till June, and now it looks like it's going to be May of this year. that we'll hear what the final ruling on what the new rules for transfers into trusts and corporations will be. Mm-hmm. And everyone's basically expecting that. The last expectation was that it will be a CLAO signature required even on transfers to a trust or to a corporation.
Yeah, I know that's what recently prompted me to get off my butt and get the paperwork out for an SBR.
Yeah.
So, which was funny because until doing Mobile Scout with the guys from Death Valley Magazine, before that I was just kind of like, I want suppressors more than one in SBR, but then getting in and out of cars with a full-size rifle.
Then you start finding the advantages of an SBR, yes.
You're like, oh, this was fun. I just sweat my buddy's legs and fell over my own rifle. I think I'm going to go get me an SBR.
Yeah, that's the thing is that everyone has to, we want to tell people to take advantage and exercise their rights, but do look at how you're really using your gun. I still think that the SIG brace works just fine as a pistol, and using a pistol in and out of a truck is a lot easier than using a short barreled rifle or a standard barreled rifle. Mm-hmm. But what I would rather see is for us to get rid of the NFA altogether. I would rather see the National Firearms Act at the very least peeled back so that things like short barreled rifles and short barreled shotguns aren't something that require paperwork.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they should, because there's no way that you can tell me that an 11-inch barreled AR is any more lethal than a 16-inch AR.
The funny thing is I think it might actually be the other way around, technically, given the velocity differences.
There is that.
Yeah,
absolutely. We're talking up, what is it? Between 11 and 16 inches, you're giving that 300 or 400 feet per second. So yeah, the longer barrel is the more dangerous one.
Yeah.
Especially if we look at this M855 ban that we had that came up and went away. Well, actually, it was interesting. Just before we connected, so that is still out. It was shelved famously. That. The ATF got 90,000 comments on that issue, which is a record. They've never had that many comments on anything that they've ever done before. And, of course, they were overwhelmingly negative. But one of the things that B. Todd Jones made obvious, who the current director of the BATF, made obvious in a recent Senate meeting was that proposal wasn't just about M855. As he said in front of the Senate, all 5.56 ammo is a challenge to law enforcement, law officer safety. So the reality is they were writing their framework to potentially ban all rifle ammunition.
Wow, that's frightening.
Yeah.
That's truly frightening.
Yeah. But that's the reality. We come back to what's the mindset. I mean, it's the president said very clearly when Congress did not move forward with background checks and any of the assault weapons bans or any of that kind of stuff, that he would take every effort that he could to enact quote unquote common sense gun control. Mm-hmm. And, to me, the appointment of Todd Jones was very much another step in that direction. He may have only 2 years or 2.5 years left in office to affect anything, but that doesn't mean he's going to be a lame duck. He may be facing a Congress that won't do anything that he wants them to do, but he's going to do everything he can through executive action.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be fair. You can do a lot of damage very fast through regulation and executive action.
Exactly. And what we've already seen is the Democrats have introduced a bill since the shelving of the M855 ban, saying that basically trying to pass a law to ban all M855 ammo. But the way that the bill is written, it bans all 5.56 caliber ammunition. So again, the fight is not over on that regard. We're facing a threat that will be there probably in perpetuity. I mean, as long as, and it's not that I trust Republicans on that issue or on all issues at all, because they certainly have their pitfalls. But as long as there is a threat of ending up with a Democratic majority in Congress and another Democratic president, we're going to have an uphill fight as far as maintaining the right to keep and bear arms.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to watch the next presidential election and to see the next big spike in gun sales. And I mean, all these gun companies that are starting to cry right now about, our gun sales are down. I'm like, just wait. Like, you don't even have to wait 2 years. Just wait like a year. Everybody is going to flip out all over again.
Right. As soon as I think that Hillary is going to survive this email fiasco, which, by the way, that is clearly wrong. And I know of people who faced Article 15 and court-martial for doing what she did, and yet she goes, well, other people were allowed. So, I mean, the woman committed it. It's not a crime criminally, but it is a crime of procedure, and it is wrong, and she should have to deal with that. But I think she's going to survive that, and unfortunately, I think she's likely to be our next president simply because right now the opposition can't get its act together. Yeah. If you give them enough time, they will shove not just their foot, but their knee and their thigh and half their ass down their own throat.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, it's something, I don't know what it is about the Clintons, but they do seem to be able to shake just about anything off. Oh, you were getting a blowjob while
murder, getting a blowjob in the White House or any of that. Yes, they shake it all off.
Yeah. I mean, it is amazing. It is amazing. I mean, how many mobsters wish they had that kind of Teflon?
Well, my guess is that they probably, if we look back far enough, they're related to Robert Durst or something. So.
They must just have some incredible dirt on a large number of people or something.
Oh, I don't doubt that they do. Unfortunately, I work in an environment where I see the underbelly of politics on a regular basis. And yeah, it's amazing how much dirt that these guys apparently have on each other and yet they glad hand and grab ass each other on a regular basis at lunches and dinners and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I guess to them it's just cost of doing business.
It is, and it is such I can only describe it as incestuous to watch. It's just it really does make you feel dirty to spend time around them. Mm-hmm. And yeah, the Clintons are one of those entities that I just don't. I mean, anytime that you can say to somebody, it depends on what your definition of is, and that's a solid argument, and people go, okay,
sure, yeah. It sounded reasonable. It's like, wow.
So, yeah, like I said, them and Robert Durst, those are the folks that I look up to. If I ever have to commit a crime, I want to find out how exactly to arrange that sort of criminal defense, because nothing sticks to them.
And always remember, the mic is hot.
Yes.
Wow. I mean, wow. Yeah, that guy. Mm.
Yeah. Well, but the thing is, we come back to just, you deal with lawyers. Any lawyer will tell you, it's like, it doesn't matter if the mic was hot. He didn't say it in court. And even if he said it in court, when you factor in everything else the guy has done, it doesn't matter.
The least of his worries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the least of their concern. So it'll be interesting. Going forward, the next, probably, I don't know, with the collapse of China and everything else going on, I think that the next 3 to 4 years will be potentially exciting times in this country. If you aren't somebody who's prepared to live off the grid or to live on your own, you may be in for some serious hurt in the next few years. Yeah.
And that explains a lot why, it's interesting. Somebody was asking me about that recently, and they were like, what do you think the proliferation of survivalism is all about? And I said, I think people are trying to hide their head in the sand, but I think it becomes harder and harder every day to ignore how unstable things are and just the trajectory of shit we're headed for. Yeah. So, I mean, it could be tomorrow, it could be 5 years from now, but it's just kind of unmistakable. It's kind of like when you're driving a car in the rain and the second you've lost control, but you're still like, no, this is going to end badly. I'm just going to do my best to steer it some direction that has some semblance of not killing me or hopefully other people. So
yeah, it's really going to be interesting. It's the thing that I'm surprised hasn't happened yet, that is one of my main reasons for continuing to carry a gun on a regular basis. It's not that I have no thought in my mind of being a hero to anybody else. I carry a gun for me and to protect my wife while we're out. And if my family and friends that are lucky enough to be around. I mean, if something happens and I have an exit, I'm going to take that egg, leave it. But, earlier today I believe it was in Tunisia, multiple gunmen walked into a mall and, killed at least 20 people.
Yeah.
And that's not the first time that's happened. That's frighteningly, that seems to be the new norm. We saw it in Kenya last year. We've seen it at least 2 or 3 other places in the last 18 months.
Yeah.
That sort of incident, I was worried that was going to happen when we saw the Beltway snipers almost 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Worried that that's what we were facing then. But I do wonder, especially who was at Mall of America not too long ago, they were presenting their guards and it looked like they were supposed to be learning Krav Maga, but it turned into, like a slap fest with screaming, get back. I was like, that's security. We're screwed.
Yeah. Yeah. Having spent time in architecture and specifically in facilities security as it applies to to the structures themselves, one of the things we used to sit around and pontificate about and think, okay, my God, that is one of the few things we can't guard against. And the other one was the shopping mall or the museum or the hotel or something like that, where it's, hey, you know what, a little bit of steel cable and some carabiners and a few guns, and we've got the place on lockdown and we're just going on our murderous rampage.
Right.
If we're those kind of people.
Right.
So,
and that's the thing. People don't think about how easy it is to do that. And I used to think, I worked with a guy at one point in time his job had been physical security at one point. And so he carried that habit over into our electronic security business. So it was, okay, how do you break into this? And we would actually go through the process of doing penetration testing and breaking stuff. And okay, well, now that you've broken into it, how would you prevent someone from doing the very attack you just did? But when it came to the physical security stuff, we sat there and planned out, okay, well, how would you assault the office? And unfortunately, even in office settings, in a lot of offices, it wouldn't take much to lock that place down and wreak havoc, and no one's going to be there before it's over.
Yeah.
It's funny. It actually came up for a discussion at my office not too long ago. Someone was like, oh, well, we're going to have a panic button and we want to make sure that's working. I was like, why? Why bother? Because if someone comes up here, and unfortunately, because of all the political jazz that's going on, there's a possibility of that. Nobody's going to be here before that person's done dealing with this office. It will be a Charlie Hebdo type thing. Mm-hmm. What we should be planning is either how to get everybody out of the office or get them into a hiding place or barricade or otherwise neutralize that threat rather than simply letting them walk through the office and murder people.
Yeah, and I think people don't get that. I think even like in their homes and their offices, they had this sense of, oh, well, the police will be here. I've had to set off the panic alarm in my home before. It took the police 45 minutes to show up.
Right.
I mean, a lot can go wrong in 45 seconds, let alone 45 minutes.
45 minutes.
45 minutes, and they've set up in the dining room, and Hannibal Lecter is eating my brains or something weird. I mean, it's insane. I don't know, somebody I know, I can't remember who it was, and I was telling the story. They were like, why do you carry around the house? And I was like, last time I did it, 45 minutes. That's why I don't take my gun off until I go to bed. And even then, sometimes my girlfriend has to remind me, can you take off your gun, please? We're in bed. Like, well, come on. I mean, a little cowboy time. I mean, it'll be fun.
Yeah. Just get around it, honey. Straddle, put your leg in. But yeah, no, I the thing is most people, and I don't remember how I came to that realization, but the reality is most people have never actually had to make a phone call and rely on emergency services to get there to resolve a problem. And so because they don't have that experience, we come back to the TV expectation. The popular media expectation is, and even in commercials for ADT or any of the alarm companies, they create this expectation, oh, you will hit the alarm and someone will be there immediately, and the bad guy will hear the alarm and just run away. And we can even relate this back to the open carry issue. The mindset of, I have this lucky rabbit's foot that tells them that I have it, and therefore they will go, not the guy to mess with. I'll leave him alone. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's because I grew up on the east side of town, and it wasn't quote unquote the ghetto, but it wasn't exactly a cakewalk either. Mm-hmm. I grew up with guys for whom getting shot was the cost of doing business. Mm-hmm. They don't care that you have a gun or that you called the police or that you've done any of that. They're going to do what they want to do and then move on. Your problem will have run its course before anyone shows up. And most people have simply never had that experience. And most of those who do, unfortunately, don't survive the lesson to tell anyone about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're a statistic. And I don't know how we I don't know, other than those who are smart enough to check out your podcast and your blog or like-minded blogs. I don't know how you get past that for people, because everyone wants to look at Justin Bieber and cat videos and everything else. They don't want to think about the hard stuff, about how do I cover my own behind when the storm comes. And it can be as simple as that. The storm comes and you've got to feed yourself and provide for your own medical care and all this other stuff, because right now all social services are suspended while they're dealing with other issues.
Mm-hmm. I mean, we've certainly seen that a number of times with the hurricanes we've both lived through.
What kills me is we see those time and time again. It's never a question of if, it's always a question of when.
Yeah.
We've had a number of quiet years now. We've gone 6 or 7 years now. It's been relatively quiet in Houston.
Yeah.
We know it's another one coming. It's just when.
Yeah.
And yet, you have folks that, I still remember the last after action review I did for Rita. One of my lessons learned was I needed to have jerry cans in the truck, enough jerry cans to refuel the truck at least one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember my CFO at the time going, well, that's just preposterous. That's dangerous. Why would you have gasoline in your car? And I'm going, do you drive a car? Because there's a gasoline tank in that thing.
And how long did we all have to go without gasoline the last time that a hurricane came through? Or even, I think it didn't even come through. It just threatened to come through.
It missed. It went to like Port Arthur. And yet it still disrupted services here in Houston. And I knew folks who had to make drives to like Brenham to go get fuel for their generators.
Mm. And the funny thing is, I know a lot of people who've lived here their whole lives.
Right.
And they still are the people standing in line at Home Depot or at the grocery store right before the hurricane. Yeah. Or shit, even the day of. Right. I like to go just to watch the shenanigans or to pick up a bottle of vodka. But that's it. But it's just to watch and go, really? If you've been here for more than a year or two, you get it. Hurricanes, very nasty. And they do happen here and they mess stuff up. But
yes.
Every time it's new. It's like when it hasn't rained for a while and all of a sudden everybody forgets how to drive in the rain.
No, they forget how to drive in the sunlight, dude.
Well, this is Houston we were talking about.
Yeah, that's the other one that kills me is I don't know if it's a human nature thing. We are easily lulled into just complacency. And you see it, driving is a prime example. I've lost count of the number of times I've driven past people who were, they're reading and putting on lipstick at the same time. And I really don't know how in the world anyone can do that and still drive.
Or even keep their driver's license, or that their insurance even keeps them.
But we come back to the same mindset. So you and I see that there's a reason to, if anything, have a higher standard for driving.
Yes.
To make it harder to get the license. And yet, if we turn around and did that with guns, what would people do?
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and it is tricky. And it goes back to it. I think both you and I feel the same way, where it's just like, I really don't want there to be any rules, but
there's always someone that tells you exactly why those rules need to be there.
Yeah.
And it is a conundrum for me. And I really do get it. But I guess I'm coming around. I am, strangely enough, and I hate to say it, but I'm coming around to the constitutional carry mindset. And believe it or not, what has gotten me there has been the voter ID debate.
Mm.
Because realistically, it's the exact same issue. It boils down to voting is a right.
Mm.
And it's either a right or it's not. And, we had a whole issue about poll taxes at one point. And to require me to go pay money for an ID that I must present to exercise as right means it's not a right, means it's a privilege that can be taken away at the government's whim. And so if we're looking at it from that perspective, the right to carry, it's the same thing.
Mm.
As much as I don't want the felons that literally living, it's, what is that, 100 yards away from me right now.
Nice.
They're two convicted felons. I don't want them owning guns because I see them on a regular basis and I know that they have poor judgment and that they really shouldn't be out without a leash.
Mm-hmm.
But how do I balance knowing that with preventing someone from saying to me, hey, Gary, let's go back to Jim Crow. You're black. I don't want you to have guns because I just don't trust you, Rudy Giuliani or Michael Bloomberg. I'm sorry.
Mm.
So to say that you're in this demographic that we just guys that look like you don't act right with guns, so we're going to take away that right from you.
Mm.
It's too easy to go there to me with both when we look at the voter perspective and the gun perspective.
Yeah.
And so that's what's kind of gotten me around to looking at constitutional carry, almost to the point that I'm willing to say, you know what? Even if you're a felon, if you're a guy who's gone 20 years and you haven't robbed a bank, maybe you should be able to get your rights back.
You know, not too long ago, I was forced to think about that as far as it came up and the debate came up. And I was like, you know, I mean, if you've served your time and you're back out on the street, then, I mean, you could be poor decision, Rob Lowe, but at the end of the day, if you paid your time and you paid your dues, then who am I to say that you shouldn't be able to defend yourself?
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. And and that's kind of where I am. And it's coming full circle because I can remember being not a huge fan of the CHO law to begin with as a teenager, because I just graduated high school. And in 93, I actually had an elderly woman pull a gun on me in the Galleria.
I remember you telling me about that. Yeah.
And so that experience left me a little upset about the idea of saying that everybody can carry a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Because that woman at the time was actually a judge, and that's why she was able to carry a gun before the CHO laws.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, for every idiot out there, there's thousands and thousands of us that just want to be able to live our lives in peace, and you know, we can make good decisions, and we should be allowed to.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, like I said, that's where I am. It's weird to feel that way. Because at the same time, you know, as we've said over and over again here, is that there's always that one guy out there that is the reason we go, this is why we can't have nice things. This is the idiot that can't make a good decision on his own.
Yeah. Well, Gary, we've kept you already for an hour. So, and I know you got stuff to get to. So I sure appreciate you coming on today. And we'll have to have you on again to have another conversation about guns and toys and other exciting things. I sure appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, and again, you are one of the co-hosts of Guns Over Texas, a podcast I can't highly recommend enough. Thanks again, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Again, we want to thank Gary for joining us today, and be sure to check his podcast out at gunsovertexas.com. They publish weekly. Great show. Can't recommend it enough. And with that, we wrap up episode 127. Thank you for joining us today. From the Lone Star State, till next time, stay safe and sound.